So I'm going to start right now. So just to give a little brief introduction for those of you who are not familiar with Shenzhen. So it's a city in southern China bordering Hong Kong. And actually, it was the first special economic zone in China that started in 1979 when China started the reform and opening up policy. So 40 years ago, it was actually just a fish village with 30,000 people. And right now, actually, it's a city that with 20 million people in total. And it's often dubbed as known as the Silicon Valley in Asia because a lot of the high-tech companies such as Tencent, Huawei, which are very hot in the news these days, these companies were all founded and headquartered in Shenzhen. So we have a pretty big high-tech ecosystem in here in Shenzhen and sort of an atmosphere for innovation and technology and etc., which I think it's quite important to set the scene for what we have done in the past few years. And just a little bit, this is a little bit of stats for Shenzhen. The population, 13 million, is the registered population, but including migrant and floating population, that would add to about 20. And the GDP is around 350 billion US dollar, that just surpassed Hong Kong 2 years ago. And because it's such a new city that I always like to sort of start my presentation just to give a little bit of an overview of what the city looks like. And now let's move on to Shenzhen Bus Group. So we are actually the oldest and the largest public transportation operator in Shenzhen. So there are 3 of us, and we have around 6,000 buses, and we operate around 5,800 taxis. And here, I think for the purpose of the presentation, so all of our buses and taxis have been electrified in the past 5 to 10 years. So right now we are the first and the only city and operator in the world that runs on a complete electric fleet. And that is a huge shift in our operations, which I will talk a little bit more in depth later. Because it required a massive amount of operations and infrastructure changes in the past, past 10 years. And we also operate different services such as cross-border services, intercity service in Guangdong, the Greater Bay Area between Shenzhen, Hong Kong, Macau. And we also have an all-purpose card, sort of like the octopus card in London, etc., where people use it for e-payments. And so yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the process of our electrification. So we've started testing on hybrid buses and electric buses in 2008, and this was 10 years ago. It was a long journey. And it was during then the pollution issue mostly centered in northern China, particularly cities like Beijing, was getting very out of control then. And both the Chinese government and our municipal government decided that there needs to be an aggressive agenda to push the public transportation to go electric in order to combat the pollution problem, which I think is a very similar case that's happening all over the world, especially in places like India and Latin America as well, where we can see. So that was the key driver for electrification in China, and Shenzhen was actually the first city that sort of took on this initiative because of the abundance of subsidies that were available from both central government and the municipal government in Shenzhen. As I have mentioned previously, because it's such a high-tech and a more cash-rich municipal government, they were able to subsidize a lot of the process for public transportation operators like us. So in the process, we not only us as the public transport operator gets subsidies from the government, other players such as the manufacturers, the charger providers, and everyone else in the ecosystem. If you're participating in it, then you are certified to apply for subsidies from the government. So because I think the government was very clear on that, in order to support this electrification process, buying the buses is the easy part. It's the harder part is always to get the infrastructure ready and up to speed as well. So for us, even though we started in 2008, it was more so like a trial run. We bought around 3,000 to 4,000 buses from the year 2015 to 2017, which is when we completely electrify our bus fleet. So it was during that 3 years where we really pushed through all the operational changes and infrastructure changes. And by 2017, we have replaced all our diesel buses to electric buses. So part of that reason is, as I mentioned, is to qualify for the subsidies, because right now, in order to incentivize the operators to change it, there is a time limit for when the subsidies are available. And also, that was also the phase where we were phasing out a lot of our diesel buses. So I think the timeline was a factor that played in part here. And but now we are still, now we have been operating for 3 years with a full electric bus fleet. And I think it's safe to say that we have not had any incidents. The experience has been very good, certainly has done a tremendous job in helping, the air quality and particularly the noise reduction in Shenzhen, which is very noticeable. So Shenzhen was not very polluted to start with, because we are a coastal city and we have always been very green as a new city. But there has been a significant change. And from 2017 to 2018 was when the initiative to start electrifying all the taxis were also done. So by December 2018, we've changed all our buses to the BYD E6. So that was actually a year ago. So this was quite recent. And right now, a lot of our focus is actually to build a robust infrastructure for our charging, where we had to develop what are the fast charging technologies that we can use here, where we can charge up to multiple buses and taxis at the same time and take advantage of electricity prices and etc. So we charge most of our buses at night, because the electricity price is 4 times lower at night comparing to what it is during the day. And in order to take advantage of that, we have to look at, if you check the photos here below, that you can see these have multiple plugs where you can charge up to 4 buses at the same time. So that is to reduce the manual labor that we can have at the depot at night, where they have to shift the buses around. And here, I think this has been our experience on sort of the benefits of electric buses, which I'm sure a lot of you who are in the industry already are familiar with, so I'll not go into depth in this. And these are some of the figures actually that we have calculated. In terms of procurement, I think it really, really depends on some of the financial leasing regime that your city or the operators in your countries that can come up with. I think each country is quite different, but I think I am aware that in Latin America, a lot of us are stuck at the first stage of procurement in terms of financials. So I think it's quite important that for us, we also work with the World Bank, Asia Development Bank, etc., that we provide some of these figures, financial figures, to say, okay, you might want it to look at the benefits of transforming a city's bus fleet to electric. Then you can give out the loans to countries where it's needed. So I think in whether it's private foundation or government, like it is the case in China, or development banks, we gotta be more creative to look at the funding mechanisms here. Here, as I just mentioned, that most of our buses are 10.5 meter buses. We are gradually reducing the numbers of big and long vehicles into sort of medium-sized and smaller buses, because we are facing intense competition from a growing metro network in Shenzhen, which is great because the city is developing rapidly, expanding every day. And I think last year we had, 5 years ago, we had 8 metro lines, and in the next 3 years, we're going to have 13 metro lines. So for us, we are seeing the role of buses to gradually shift from being the trunk route provider, the main public transportation provider, to sort of a subsidiary where we are picking people up to the main and dropping them off to the main transportation hub for subway stations or smaller, more flexible routes. So I think that's also a reason why we're looking into purchasing smaller buses as well. And for those of you who have visited us in Shenzhen, we also, in the beginning, that we had to train our staff, we send them to our manufacturer. Luckily for us, so a lot of our buses are from BYD because they are also locally headquartered and made in Shenzhen. And I know that they sold a bunch to Santiago as well last year. And because the technology was so nascent when we started trying 10 years ago, it was very, very important that the OEMs were close to us and that they were able to provide support as soon as we need them. So the BYD would send a ton of their mechanics and guys to station at our bus depots, and we would have our staff to go in and train with them as well. And so all of the 3 components, the battery, the engine, and all of that, if that's broken, we send it back to BYD. And especially 10 years ago, the battery was at a very not mature stage. But I think so right now, I can say that the technology has improved a lot over the years, and it was very important that for bus operators who work closely with OEMs to give them a lot of the technical feedbacks, especially in the early stage when you're adapting your fleet management expertise. So here's sort of the taxis that we operate. We have around 22,000 taxis in Shenzhen, and we operate around 5,000 of them. And they are all electric. We're facing some problems with not having enough charging, and we're rapidly building these chargers, but obviously there's still not enough. And we are looking into leasing more land with the city government, district government, and it's a constant sort of improvement on infrastructure. So we are coming up with this comprehensive charging station that is serving as a one-stop station to serve the passengers, drivers, and taxis where, so our taxi drivers usually take up 1 hour and a half to 2 hours for the main charge each day, and they do it typically during noon, so where they can have lunch, they could get a massage, etc. So this charging station actually is opening next month, where they would have restaurants, hairdressers, all of that. for the taxi drivers to sort of relax when they get their car charged. And also is also another way for us to diversify our income and source of revenue. And another area, last but not least, we also have an on-demand service that was a joint venture that we set to build with Didi, which is the ride-hailing app in China, so sort of like Uber. And we are the majority shareholder of this joint venture. And what we do is we provide the buses, we provide the routes, drivers, and Didi as the technology provider and software provider. They design the software, they do all of the user experience, etc., that design, and then we run an app-based line where it's more of an express line that takes people from their home to the peak CBDs, the central business areas. So you would have less stops. You can book your seat on the app, and typically what would take on a traditional bus route, maybe like a 30-minute ride, it would only take you 10 to 15 minutes because there will be less stop on this, and all the algorithm is optimized on the app. And the second service that they run is the sort of like a big Uber pool, like a dynamic route with no fixed route and no fixed schedule. This is a very new service that they're providing. And yeah, we're also trialing an autonomous driving vehicle that has been running in the past 3 years in one of the residential area in Shenzhen. And yeah, so we're hoping to see, you know, what the future holds. And any questions regarding electrification, etc., I'm happy to, you know, answer. And I actually just did another webinar on our experience battling COVID-19 in the past 2 months since the epidemic broke out in China. It's greatly affected everyone, and which I know it's tremendously locked down the entire world as well. So I will also talk a little bit about that later. But right now, I think if anyone has any questions about Shenzhen Bus Group or our electrification experience, I'm happy to answer them. Okay.
Yep. Thank you so much, Hallie, for your presentation. I think it's very interesting for all of the audience that is right now on the call. Everyone is wondering how they're going to achieve the level of electrification that you have as soon as we can. So we have some questions for you. I will read them in Spanish first and then translate it for you.
Okay.
So, la primera pregunta sería, ¿cuántos técnicos tienen por autobús para servicio de postventa o mantenimiento? So, the first question would be, how many technicians do you have for bus maintenance or after-sale service in the company?
Okay. So right now is actually one maintenance to 1-to-7 ratio. So
Okay,
so we have 6,000 buses. So 6,000 divided by 7, I would say maybe 600, 700.
So you have one person that attends the maintenance of 7 buses?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. There's another question. Perdón. La contestación es que ellos tienen una persona de mantenimiento para cada 7 autobuses. La segunda pregunta es, ¿hasta qué grado dependiente pueden subir dichos buses? The next question is, what is the slope that the electric buses can go up in Shenzhen? I don't know if Shenzhen is very hilly.
Okay, yeah. So that's a great question. We are a very flat city, so there's virtually no hills here, which has been very beneficial to trial the electric buses, because I know that so Hong Kong is only 20 minutes away from us. I live by the border and they have had huge issues going up, their Healy Mountains in Hong Kong because it's not as flat.
Okay, thank you. Nos dice que Shenzhen es bastante plana, por lo tanto ellos no han tenido ningún problema con estos temas, pero sabe que del otro lado de la frontera, ya en lo que es Hong Kong como sí es muy, tiene muchos montañitas, pues, ellos sí han tenido muchos problemas, pero en el caso de Shenzhen, por ser muy plana, todavía no se han enfrentado a esos problemas. La siguiente pregunta es, ¿cuál sería el indicador para darle mantenimiento preventivo al bus? ¿Y cuáles son los costos de ese mantenimiento por bus? The next question is, what would be the indicator to give preventive maintenance to the buses? And what is the cost of the maintenance per bus?
Could you repeat the first question?
It says, what is the indicator to give preventive maintenance to the bus? But I think it refers to which is the preventive maintenance. So the maintenance done before the whatever breaks down, and how much would that cost?
Got it. So so far the deal that we have with the OEMs are that we would do the regular maintenance outside of, the battery, the motor, and the engine. And anything that goes wrong with those three, that we send the bus back, or that they send their maintenance staff to come. And then at the end of the month, they send us a bill, or reverse, or right now reverse, that we have trained our maintenance staff where we would actually do some of the maintenance ourselves, and then we can save some of the cost there. And in terms of preventative maintenance, we have been looking into it. We have not, we are not officially using any preventative maintenance yet, for many reasons. I think the stage of technology is still not mature enough that we have a good provider for predictive maintenance that makes sense with the OEMs right now, but we are actively looking into it. Because with our diesel buses, that we have used preventative maintenance.
Okay. Lo que nos comenta es que ellos tienen un acuerdo con los productores en el que la empresa operadora hace el mantenimiento regular y todo lo relacionado con las baterías, el motor, en la batería y el motor está mantenido por el fabricante. En términos de el proceso que han llevado es que ellos ya tienen, después de todos estos años de operación, ellos han ido capacitando a su propio personal, y lo que antes era una factura mensual fija por el mantenimiento de estos elementos de parte del productor de los buses, ahorita ya se está reduciendo porque ellos ya tienen su propio mantenimiento interno. Hay otra pregunta. Sobre el mantenimiento preventivo. Lo que nos comentan es que cuando tenían la flota diésel sí hacían un mantenimiento preventivo, sin embargo ahorita, por ser una tecnología tan nueva, no lo están tomando tan en cuenta aún, dado que las flotas son todavía muy, muy recientes y la tecnología obviamente también es muy reciente. Vamos con la cuarta pregunta. Sé que hay muchísimas más preguntas, pero para darnos espacio a la parte de las medidas de prevención de la pandemia, lo que vamos a hacer es, hacemos esta última pregunta, pasamos a la presentación, después hacemos otro periodo de preguntas sobre la presentación de la pandemia, y todas las preguntas que tienen las vamos a contestar por correo, no se preocupen, nada más que por ajustarnos un poco a los tiempos. Entonces, la cuarta pregunta es, ¿existe una tarifa eléctrica especial para los vehículos eléctricos en Shenzhen? So the last question, Haley, for this part of the presentation would be, is there a special electricity rate for EV charging in Shenzhen?
Yeah, good question, actually. So I think it's very important before this process to talk to your local electricity providers. And for us, since we are such a huge industrial user, we get a discounted rate for our charging. And that has been quite beneficial.
Thank you so much. So, lo que nos dice es que antes de empezar todo este proceso, ella sugiere hablar con la compañía eléctrica local. Ellos, como tienen este gran consumo industrial de los buses y los taxis, lo que han conseguido es una tarifa de descuento que realmente ha hecho que el proyecto de electrificación y toda su operación pues sea altamente beneficiosa. Hallie, so I think that just to move on to the next part of the presentation, we will cut it here. There's many other questions that we will get back to you, so you can help us.
Yes.
But I think that this part is also very interesting right now, so I wouldn't like to omit it. So back to you.
This part is not as interesting. It's more dire and emergency. But I'm very happy to talk about what we did in the past 2 months. Just to give an overview for what's going on in China. We have been in a lockdown since the end of January, since the outbreak of COVID-19 in Wuhan, Hubei, which was in the middle of China. They're about 2 hours flight away from us, so we're not close to Wuhan. But still, since Shenzhen is such a big immigrant city with tons of traffic coming in and out every day, especially in February, which was the peak of the outbreak in China, it was Chinese New Year. So actually the tradition here is that everyone would go visit and go back to their home city provinces. So there's a massive moving around of traffic during that time, which is why the Chinese government actually put everyone in the entire country in a massive lockdown for the past seven weeks, I think from the end of January to end of February. So we have been slowly, I think right now we are all going back to work. Things seems to be returning to normal. I would say 95% of us are going back to work, but we're still being very careful because there's a second wave of imported cases. So in the last week, we've had, I think, 20 to 30 new cases in Shenzhen, and all of them were imported from, they were Chinese returning from either Europe, the US, and etc. So I think we are still being cautious. So none of us are going out to bars, the restaurants, or in other entertainment activities because it's still, the situation is still not completely eradicated yet. So just to give the sort of the numbers that the epicenter of the outbreak was Wuhan, which they had a majority, I think 50,000 cases, and in Shenzhen we have 400 cases up till now. And I think the silver lining is that, you know, if you've implemented sort of a lockdown, social distancing, and all the policies quickly enough and forceful enough, actually, that in 2 months, I think there is hope that things can go back to normal as what we're hoping to see right now. And just see the impact of the public transportation. The number that we see in February, obviously, since everyone was staying and working from home and forbidden to go out, the public transportation ridership has declined by almost 90%. So a lot of our buses were empty. We've cut and adjusted a lot of our operations, increased the time span. And we reserved it for a lot of the medical medical professionals and logistic delivery workers. So what happened was that since the beginning, we put together an emergency and health working group that was comprised of all the important personnel from all our subsidiary companies, because we have almost 30,000 staff. And at one point, 1/3 of them were traveling outside of Shenzhen during Chinese New Year. So we had to put in place a strict self-isolation period for anyone that comes into the city. So for our employees, if they are coming back from Wuhan or Hubei, or actually from other provinces, they are required to stay home for 14 days of self-isolation period. And obviously, if you're coming back from Wuhan or Hubei, that's it's at least a month before they're being let out, because right now actually Wuhan is still in a lockdown, and I think they're going to lift the lockdown in 2 weeks. So all our drivers and staff on board are required to wear face mask. That is to protect them, and is also to protect our passengers. And all our buses are kept at a below 50% occupancy rate. And we keep empty buses at the depot or bus stop nearby. If there is a demand where passengers could get over 50% at certain stops, then we dispatch another empty bus immediately. And we monitor these traffic flow by our cameras on board. So we have 7 cameras on each buses, and we have a 24-hour emergency room that we set up with people making shifts to monitor sort of the cases and situation on the bus 24 hours. So I think that's very important to have a central command mechanism set up in the beginning of the outbreak. So because this disease is so contagious, and that it just developed way too fast before anyone knew what was happening. So we also did an emergency procurement where we purchased all the face masks, disinfectants, and hand sanitizers for rolling stock for all our staff in the beginning, where we had to put that in place so that our drivers would feel safe going to work. And in terms of cafeterias and canteen, so we have actually 50 cafeterias at all our depots, our headquarters. And because this is such a high risk area for cross infection, we've developed a schedule where people have to go and get their meals at different times, and that we put the tables into only one person table, and you're not allowed to talk to anyone when you go, and you can only take off your masks when you're eating. So that sort of decreased the risk of cross-infection and community spread if there were any, confirmed cases. But luckily, we didn't have any internal confirmed cases. And I think one of the most important thing is that we were able to leverage some of the technology that we had. First, I think it's this app that we use. So in China, I would say 95% of our tickets and payments were done via our phone, so our mobile payments. Typically, they use WeChat or Alipay, etc. So it's quite normal for them to be already scanning QR code. And for us for contact tracing purposes, we actually ask all our passengers this is during the peak of outbreak in February, when they get on the bus or when they get on the taxi, they would scan the QR code, put down their cell phone number for registration. This is all voluntary, it's not mandatory. But luckily, everyone has been very cooperative, because it's for their own safety that we take down their info in case later that we find out if someone on that vehicle or some passenger on our bus has been infected or has been confirmed, that everyone that he has shared a vehicle with has to be tracked down as soon as possible. And our passengers understand that, so people were very cooperative. They put down their phone number. It's the same as that we only establish one entrance and exit for all our buildings and depots. And at the entrance of the building, where we have a security personnel that would take down your phone number, your name, and take your temperature with an infrared temperature taker. So that's another way just to trace, who's in and out of the building. And I think this is very important to contain community spread. And here for our taxis, we put sort of this plastic protective shield that blocks the passenger and our drivers, because taxis are such an intimate space that this is just a way to ensure people that that we are taking protective measures. And we disinfect all. During the peak of the time, our taxis are required to disinfect and clean after every passenger ride. And for our buses, we disinfect them after each service trip. So, and then we have a little sheet that is sticked on the taxi door and the bus door, where it says the timing and a signature of the last time that we disinfected and cleaned it. So the passengers can see that this bus or this taxi was cleaned maybe an hour ago. Yeah, but typically what happens is that there's no one on the street anymore. So we were running a lot of empty buses, and we had to come up with a lot of the apply for reimbursement and from the government to subsidize the taxi drivers, because they were making probably only 10% of what they would normally make during this time. And particularly in the case of Wuhan, they actually use a lot of the buses and taxis to transport the delivery service and the doctors that were commuting in the city. So I know that because there were a lot of people in lockdown in Wuhan, where they had community organizers to take down the food requirement and all that they need. And they have these organizers to go to the grocery stores, get them, and then take the buses to come back and disseminate the food to deliver it to everyone's door. So that was sort of all of the very complicated but robust regime that were put in place during a lockdown. But I think right now we're slowly seeing the measures opening up again. And last but not least, we also had an online training course where we use our phones and the computer. It was an online platform for our training for our staff, particularly the drivers and the staff, on how sort of the technical guide on how to disinfect, the frequency of disinfecting, and what are the emergency protocols for transit, and also our daily schedule changes, how to communicate that with everyone. And we publish all of that information on our official channels, websites, and local newspaper in terms of our schedule changes, so that our passengers knows that these changes are taking place. Yeah, so I think, sorry, last but not least, because actually a lot of our staff were quarantined back in Wuhan in February. So it was very important for us to take care of their mental health. We set up an employee assistance program that had 32 counselors that did online counseling session for them while they were in the lockdown. I think this is very important to sort of take care of your staff when they literally have no idea when they were able to come home. So yeah, and I think this is all I have on this topic, and we can move to the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much, Haley. So for your presentation, what I see is that technology is key for the measures that you've taken, and
Yeah.
the other thing is that not only did you disinfect all the buses, but also you didn't reduce the buses or the frequency at the same manner that the users got reduced, so that the users reduced by 90, almost 90%, but then the buses may not be reduced by such a large number, so you could provide this the service with 50%. So we have next question. La siguiente pregunta es, ¿cuál es el proceso de fumigación de los buses y con qué productos? So, Haley, there is a question about what is the process of disinfecting the buses, and which products do you use, if any special, and how many times per day do you do that?
For dispatching.
For cleaning the buses, for disinfecting the buses.
Oh, for disinfecting. Actually, it's just very standard, normal disinfectants that we procure locally. We are actually now looking into the nanotechnology one, where they use it, they've used it on buses in Hong Kong. And it's the sort of nano surface where you spray it and it can cover the area for at least 3 to 5 months. So we're looking into that, but you still have to do your regular cleaning. So right now we're just using the sort of the alcohol chlorine that does mostly the chair, the armrest, and all the surface that comes into context. Yeah, so nothing fancy.
Okay. So okay, so there is a question that is related to the previous presentation of the electric mobility part. La pregunta 5 nos lleva de regreso a la parte de movilidad eléctrica y dice, nos gustaría saber cómo resolvieron los requerimientos técnicos de la red de carga, o sea, en términos de carga. Y la pregunta 6 es, ¿cuál es la capacidad instalada para una flota de 6,000 vehículos y cuál es la solución de backup? So we have two related questions. The first one is, how did you solve the requirements for the electric network for an increase of 6,000 buses charging on the city? So the increase in the demand, how did you cope with that? And the other one is, how much is your power capacity to provide charging for 6,000 buses? And what is the backup solution, the backup system for that, for the depots?
Okay. So in some of our depots, we do have the power generators in the emergency case where there would be a shortage of it. But actually, even prior to the electrification process, the sort of the supply of electricity, there was not much of a drastic change, mostly because we have a big, nuclear plant right in, I would say maybe 30 minutes, an hour away from us, where I think the infrastructure was already in place before this process took in. So for us, the job was more so to find spaces in Shenzhen to build our infrastructure. So it's kind of a different sets of issue. Is that for us was the land scarcity to find charging places to park our buses and to charge them, and mostly anywhere that where we can find these places, the electricity, they would have abundance of it, so it wasn't really an issue for us. But yeah, we have issues with finding land.
Okay, thank you so much. Nos dice que para ellos el tema de la electricidad no es un problema. Tienen una planta nuclear muy cerca de la ciudad, por lo tanto, la capacidad no es un problema. Lo que sí les supuso un problema fue encontrar el espacio dentro de la ciudad donde ellos pudieran instalar los depots, los talleres y la zona de descanso, y que digamos que todas las áreas que encontraron ya tenían suficiente electricidad como para poder hacer puntos de carga en los mismos. Yo tengo que decir que estando allá, uno puede visitar algunos depots de Shenzhen Bus Group que se encuentran en lo que en América Latina sería la parte interna de una vecindad. O sea, digamos, en un patio interno que puede parecer un poco extraño, pero como son instalaciones que en principio no tienen demasiado ruido en las horas nocturnas, sobre todo porque son autobuses que no hacen ruido, cargan sin hacer ruido, y el mantenimiento suele ser mantenimientos menores, y si se hacen de día, se pueden colocar en espacios que normalmente uno pensaría que no pueden ir autobuses a diésel. La siguiente pregunta es, ¿puede contarnos sobre la automatización de la conducción? Que es el último punto que veíamos de la parte anterior. So, Hallie, there's another question about the automatization of self-driving cars and vehicles that you mentioned in the presentation before.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so the question is just to know what is the process and the project and how you're facing that.
Okay. So we've started testing the autonomous driving technology in December 2017. We started we invested in a company that is called Hallie that does the autonomous driving buses. So basically, we picked an area in Shenzhen that is mostly residential and is still quite new, where there's not much traffic and people there. And we have 6 small buses that with, I think the capacity is around 15 people, and so these buses just run on these roads every day, and it's mixed traffic. It was the first AV that were operated in a mixed traffic environment, I think, in the world at that time, where actually for our citizens, you can go on and trial it and take it for free if you want. It's just, I think not that many people know about it yet. And it's not, so we have I would say like a bus, he sits sort of a bus ambassador type of person that sits on the driver's seat. He doesn't really touches the wheel, but he monitors actively, and he basically takes controls if there is any emergency event that occurs.
Okay, thank you so much. So, lo que nos dice Hallie es que empezaron a rodar 6 autobuses de más o menos una capacidad de 15 pasajeros en diciembre de 2017. después de la adquisición de la empresa Hallie Hao, que aparece en pantalla, en una zona de la ciudad de Shenzhen. Nos dice que están operando en tráfico mixto y que los usuarios lo pueden tomar sin ningún tipo de costo. Dice que el uso se hace, digamos, el servicio se da a través de estos buses con una persona que se sienta en el lugar del chofer, pero que no es un conductor per se, sino que es un embajador del bus y que monitorea la operación y demás y toma el mando en caso de que haya algún problema, pero los vehículos operan de manera autónoma. Creo que ya con el tiempo encima, no me queda otra que agradecerles mucho. Sabemos que hay muchas más preguntas, las vamos a contestar a través de correo electrónico, entonces no se preocupen, les vamos a dar respuesta. Cualquier otra cosa, otra pregunta que tengan también la pueden enviar después. Thank you so much, Haley. It's pretty late for you, almost midnight already. So we're gonna leave it here. Thank you
Okay.
so very much for your presentation. It's been really, really interesting. We're gonna be bothering you a little bit more in the next days to answer the questions that they made us that we didn't have time to answer. But just thank you so much again for taking the time, for being so late for us. Y por último, nada más decirles que el siguiente ciclo de jornadas de móvil se van a orientar o van a estar enfocadas en los procesos de regulación de la movilidad eléctrica. Aún la fecha y la hora están por definir, pero les invitamos a conectarse con nosotros para el siguiente ciclo de jornadas, donde vamos a tener una primera sesión sobre procesos de homologación de vehículos eléctricos con Alfonso Cádiz, que es del Centro de Control y Certificación Vehicular del Ministerio de Transportes de Chile, donde ya han desarrollado y están en ese proceso de homologación de vehículos eléctricos, y una segunda sesión de interoperabilidad de las redes de recarga, que es un tema también bien interesante, bien importante para conseguir esa electrificación de todos los tipos de transporte que tenemos en nuestra región, con Julio Clavijo, que es jefe de Unidad de Energías Renovables y Electromovilidad de la Superintendencia de Electromovilidad y Combustibles de Chile. Les invitamos a estar atentos, a visitar la web movelatam.org para saber más, y aún así les estaremos invitando. Entonces, muchísimas gracias por atender la jornada virtual del día de hoy. Les estaremos enviando, estaremos atendiendo las preguntas que quedaron pendientes, y les invitamos a visitar la web de Move, donde encontrarán este video con esta sesión y todas las anteriores. Muchísimas gracias a todos.
Gracias a todos. Me despido también y quedamos pendientes con subir todo a la web. Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.
Haley, thanks for sharing your experience.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.